I want to address tonight ancestral veneration and ancestral healing. I think it is important to talk about this, not just because of the upcoming ancestral healing and ancestral veneration and healing ceremony, but just also for a general understanding for the collective as to the importance of ancestral veneration and ancestral healing. Many of us have heard the term many times. Many of us have somewhat of an understanding of what ancestral healing is, ancestral veneration. But I want to be able to give us a refresher of what this really is and what it entails, right? For a better understanding for those of you that are already going to participate in the Ancestral Veneration and Healing Ceremony of this year, which will be on November the 2nd on All Souls Day. And also for some of you that would like to participate but don't have a clear understanding of what ancestral healing is or ancestral veneration. So, excuse me. We have to look, when we speak about ancestral veneration, when we speak about ancestral healing, the most common terminology that comes up for many people is generational curses. But more than generational curse, more than a generational curse, what I like to really refer to it as is as generational trauma. Because generational curse, based on my spiritual experience, generational curses, as we commonly hear out there, it doesn't become necessarily a curse. Hear me out. It doesn't necessarily become a curse unless we continue to repeat the behavior over and over again, or we are gripped by the behavior that keeps us living a lifestyle that's beneath what the Creator intended us to be. If that made any sense to you. I don't have a problem per se with the terminology generational curse, but I do believe that there is a lot of emphasis on generational curse. Generational curse, generational curse, generational curse. There's a lot of emphasis on generational curse, but in reality, it's a generational trauma. And the so-called curse aspect of it only becomes a curse when we repeat the behavior, when we repeat the experience, when we repeat the pain that keeps us living beneath what God intended us to become. Right? So I want us to understand how this works. Scientifically, biologically, the vast majority of us understand and know that sickness and disease can be passed down, right? It's in our blood, it's in our genetic makeup, it's in our history, our mom, our dad, our grandparents, our uncles and aunts and what have you. We already know by now, in this day and age, that diseases can be passed down genetically, right? Heart issues, diabetes, whichever the case may be in your family history, these things can be passed down. And it has been proven genetically, it has been proven scientifically. But the same way a disease can be inherited, the same way you could probably be diabetic and your mom was diabetic and your grandmother was diabetic, the same way we can pass down diseases, right? It's the same way we can also inherit behaviors, patterns, pain, experiences, feelings. We can also inherit that as well. We know that a lot, as I said 5 minutes ago, we hear a lot of the terminology generational curse. I personally, and many spiritual healers that have been doing a lot of work around trauma, around shadow work, we like to refer to it more as generational trauma. Because as I said 5 minutes ago, in my spiritual opinion and experience, the curse does not, and I'm going to repeat this statement perhaps 100 times throughout this live because I want it to stick in your brain. We hear the term generational curse all the time, but a curse doesn't always become a curse, or doesn't necessarily become a curse unless there are patterns and behavior that repeats itself over and over and over again, allowing us to live a life that's beneath what God, the creator, the divine source of your understanding, had intended for us. Okay, I want us to really remember this point. It's not a curse unless we repeat the same pattern over and over and over again, allowing us to live a quality of life, a lifestyle that's beneath what the creator had intended for us. That being said, we said that the same way sickness and disease can be passed down to us genetically, biologically, this has been proved scientifically, it has been proven genetically, the same way we also inherit behaviors and patterns. We inherit pain. We inherit ways of living, that's behaviors basically, also as well. And it gets passed down. Trauma gets passed down. Pain also gets passed down. And all we have to do is look at our history. Look at our history in our families. Look in our histories of other, if we study and look at and observe other people's families, and we see John doing the same thing that his father Michael has done. And Michael, if we do a deep study, was probably doing the same thing that his father did once upon a time. So behaviors can be inherited. Behaviors could be passed down as well, just as diseases and what have you, heart issues, conditions, diabetes. And we can go in different directions with that, but we're not going to go there tonight. Because obviously it takes also our ability, our will, our understanding, our awareness, our intelligence to be able to create a different lifestyle so that we don't give way or don't give energy or power to becoming the next diabetic in our family. But that's a whole different topic which we will speak about, because like I said a couple of weeks ago that we're going to start coming live every single week to speak on ancestral healing, ancestral veneration, the importance of it. And because my plate has been full, I have not been able to, but I'm starting tonight, and this is going to be a weekly thing. So in order for us to understand the power of generational trauma and how it's passed down, I want us to have a basic understanding of our chakras. We know that there are 7 main chakras, at least, that's the ones that we hear about the most. There are many other chakras, but for the purposes of understanding how is it that what my grandmother did affected my mom, and because it affected my mom, also affects me. So for the purpose of understanding that alone, we're going to focus on several chakras that can help us understand how this goes down. This has been taught, this has been, spoken about. Many individuals that have a deep understanding on how the chakras work. We know that chakras are energy centers, okay, basically. And in these energy centers, energy gets moved, energy gets processed, energy is worked through every single chakra of our body, all the way down from the first chakra, which is our root, all the way up to our crown chakra. But for the purposes of ancestral veneration, specifically ancestral healing, I want to focus on the first chakra, but also the second and the third very, very, very briefly, but I want to focus on the first chakra. From the moment that we are a fetus, our first chakra, the root chakra, is already present. Being so that our root chakra is present from the moment that we are a fetus, it gives us the understanding that our history, is the word I was looking for, our generational history is stored in our first chakra. Our first chakra carries the information center of all our history, our makeup, our family history from mom and also from dad as well. That being said, it is important for us to understand that in order for us to reach our highest potential, for lack of better terminologies, lack of better words, we have to work with what's been hidden, or better yet, what has been stored in our root chakra. And what's stored in our root chakra, as I said, is our history, our family history, the traumas, the pain, the chaos, behaviors, patterns, characteristics, ideas, ideologies, behavior, all that is stored in our first chakra from the moment that we are a fetus. But let's go a little bit further back before I continue on this conversation with our chakras. Ancestral healing. Ancestral healing. Why is ancestral healing even important? Because in order for us to dive deep into where is it stored, how is it stored, why is it stored, and what can we do to fix it, you have to understand why is ancestral healing, veneration, important at all altogether. Well, the idea for us in our flesh is to live a conscious life, a most conscious life, in order for us to reach our highest potential, or become the best version of ourselves, or be the most autonomous as we can be, as autonomous as we can be, or in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and if we talk psychology, being able to reach that top of self-actualization. That is the purpose of our life. That is the purpose of why we breathe, why we're here on this earth, why we go through what we go through, is because ultimately we want to be able to feel self-actualized, reach our highest potential, be the best version of ourselves, right? So in order for us to do this, we must understand that before I got here, my mother got here first. My father got here first. And before they got here, my grandparents from both sides got here first. And before they got here, my great-grandparents from both sides got here first, and so on and so on and so on. So we didn't just arrive by ourselves. We didn't just get here all on our own and, we are it. No, someone else came before us and other individuals came before them. So there is a history that links us to the beginning of time, to the beginning of civilization, to the beginning of human life. There's a history, regardless of how far back it goes. There is a history, okay, that goes all the way back to that beginning. So understanding this, understanding the importance of ancestral healing, ancestral veneration, we must first understand its terminology. So, for example, when we speak of generational trauma, as to how I prefer to refer to it versus generational curse, generational trauma, from a dictionary standpoint, is defined as experiences or pains that predates our existence, right? Experiences of trauma that predates our current human existence. This is from a textbook aspect of it, all right? But more so, it is experiences that went down in past generations that continue to affect us here and now today. So something that occurred 100 years ago continues to, in some kind of way, affect me in this lifetime unless I work through that behavior, that pattern, that experience, that trauma, that pain. Unless I work through that, unless I release it, unless I heal it, unless I understand it, because you can't heal what you don't understand, it keeps repeating itself over and over and over again through many generations. Okay, and we'll get a little deeper on that in a little bit. So that's generational trauma from a textbook definition, basically. But from a spiritual perspective, the repetition of such behavior, the repetition of patterns and behaviors, negative patterns and behaviors that have not been broken, is what keeps the trauma alive. Okay? The repetitive nature of that behavior or that pattern is what keeps the trauma alive. And in keeping that trauma alive, it continues to have shackles over our destiny, over our goals, over our visions, over our desires, over our purpose. Okay? It continues to bind us, hold us down, or a stronghold over our goals, visions, and divine purpose. Understanding this, ancestral healing is able to assist us in being able to remove, address behaviors that keeps us stuck, patterns that keeps us living below our divine purpose. Ancestral healing and ancestral veneration allows a way for us to break free from such patterns and behaviors and traumas that keeps us living beneath our divine purpose. So the idea for us is to continue to release, to heal, so that we can become a better human being, a better person in this world, in this society, in this universe, right? There's a history in our first chakra. And the chakras are, as we said, energy centers. And these energy centers record our history, our family history. All kinds of family history that you can think of. Having this understanding, when we look at the first chakra, what is the first chakra? Well, the first chakra is our root chakra. Thank you. It says it keeps pausing. Keeps pausing for you, Jamie Rocks. Does it keep pausing for the rest of you? Okay, I see some hearts and stuff, so I believe I can... No. Okay, good. So, our first chakra is also referred to as our group chakra. This is the way we build it's linked to how we build relationships. It's the group chakra that's been referred to. Okay? And this particular chakra determines, the first chakra determines how we connect, basically. Groups of all sorts. family being number one, extended family, friends, people that we come into groups with, that is also part of our first chakra. So if there is some misinformation, better yet referred to as, some trauma that is recorded in our first chakra, that specific trauma or that negative experience or that pain alters the way we find our place in certain groups or in certain dynamics, in our family groups or in our with friends and other kinds of groups, because it is a particular group that is the particular chakra that's associated with groups, how we belong and how we connect. Okay. Excuse me. First chakra is also about our survival. It's also about our safety, our ability to provide for ourselves, to provide for our family, to provide for our loved ones, our safety, our roof over our head. All that is also part of our root chakra. So it's important for us to understand what our root chakra is, because then we can understand how certain traumas and experience in our family can alter the way we provide, the way we make money, the way we keep a roof over our head, the way we feel safe, the way we're able to feel connected, the way we're able to connect with our groups, with our family, with our friends, with any particular kind of group. Does that make any sense? Okay. So we already stated that the same way that disease is passed down, right? We also inherit what? We inherit behaviors. We inherit patterns. We inherit ways of being, ways of connecting, ways of seeing life, ways of experiencing people, ways in which we fall into relationships, romantic relationships and other kinds of relationships, ways in which we, view our community, ways in which we become, right? In the way we go about life, all that is very important to understand. Okay. Now, when we move forward, if disease is passed down to us, and now we know that behaviors can also be passed down to us, patterns can be passed down to us, then we have to also address the second chakra. We also have to address our second chakra. And our second chakra, referred to, which is our sacral chakra, also referred to as our sexual chakra, but not necessarily just from a sexual perspective in terms of sex, but it's more about bonding. So it's not just the sexual chakra, which it is in terms of sex itself, but more so the chakra that deals with. So our second chakra is our sacral, is referred to our sexual chakra, not just in terms of sex, but in terms of our bonding. So most people that carry ancestral trauma in their first chakra, the root, our safety, our ability to provide, our energy center of groups, if you have trauma in your first chakra, it will also affect your second as well. Why so? Because if we understand chakras, the root chakra is the first, and whatever information is at the root chakra, that is the information that gets passed up to the second, and then that whatever information is in the second chakra gets passed up to our third, and so on. So if you have a history of trauma, if you have a history of conflict, of pain, of loss, of poor connection, not just not this kind of connection, bad connecting with people, not finding your place, lack of self-identity, abuse, abandonment, yes, all that. If all these things are allotted, lodged in your root chakra, that information is passed on to your second, which is your sacral chakra, your sexual chakra. And if this information is passed up to your second chakra, okay, then we can deduce that ultimately there will be conflict, there will be issues in your second chakra and how you find your identity, right? In how you have a problem with bonding with people, okay? It has a problem with how you're able to find your place in certain settings, in relationships, romantic and so on, right? It has a problem with how it just carries the trauma from the first up to the second, right? You all follow me? Then we go into, and I'm not going to go up all the chakras. What, from my understandings, from my teachings as to what I have learned and what I have studied and what has been taught to me, the first three chakras are the ones that are most affected by our ancestral traumas. Okay. Then if that's the case in our second, then we go up to the third, which is also one that is affected, the first three. And our solar plexus deals with our personal identity. Okay. Our solar plexus deals with how we identify with things. Our solar plexus is also our autonomy as well, right? It's our ability to feel self-actualized, right? And it also, when you really think about it, a sense of belongingness, right? So how does ancestral trauma affects you? Is the question. If there's trauma present in your first chakra, it's very likely that such behavior that affected you at the first chakra will repeat itself throughout your whole entire life unless it is directly addressed, unless it is directly healed, unless it is directly looked into. Okay? It's very important to understand understand this. Why? Because things such as our worldview gets affected. Okay? Things as our ability to connect with people gets affected. Things as, your perception on life gets distorted. If you're carrying it, your perception of life gets distorted because the traumas that you have inherited shapes your worldview, and it shapes the way you see yourself, you experience family, you experience life, you experience everything, okay? I say this very clearly and specifically because I do not want it to be misconstrued in terms of, well, but what if I just really see life how I see it? And, I don't have to see life how other people see it. And I don't have to experience life how other people experience. Truth be told, that is the truth. You don't have to experience life how other people experience it. You don't have to see life how other people see it. What's normal to other people doesn't have to be normal to you. But when we look at ancestral trauma and its effects on your life, then you could have a distorted view of what you think life should be, and what you think relationships should be, and how you believe, you should connect with people, because the information stored in your first chakra comes through a very it comes through with a very cloudy lenses, if that makes any sense at all whatsoever. Okay, through cloudy lens. the information that was stored in your first chakra distorted how you chose to experience your life, how you chose to connect with people, how you chose to bond, how you see yourself, how you feel your identity, and your place on this universe. For example, ancestral trauma can also affect specific groups. Okay? Specific groups. Yes, we're going to go there. Why do I say this? Because ancestral trauma is not just passed down individually through our genetic makeup and through our, our biology, right? It also can affect a particular community. I need you to understand this because this is actually more powerful than I'm able to actually explain it. This latter part is more powerful than I'm able to explain it. Ancestral trauma is not just something that affects you individually as to how it's been passed down to you through your bloodline, but it can also affect a community. For example, I myself must speak about the Black community. 400 plus years. 400 plus years of being enslaved, abused, ostracized, dehumanized, traumatized, pained, manipulated, conditioned, gets passed down to a whole community. It's collective. It's collective. As a Black man, as a Black Latino, of course, I want to speak about my Black community, right? But the same goes for the Holocaust. You think the people that went through the Holocaust, that lineage, that line, doesn't get affected generation by generation after generation? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. In our Black community, my Black community, still to this day, is affected by the things that went on collectively. The abuse, the loss, the reprogramming, okay, the conditioning. And now in modern day society, all the systems that are in place to keep the Black community blind and distant from their power, right? That's why we have, well, some people don't believe in it, but hey, we have gentrification, we have prisons it's a business. The prison system is a business, okay? Let's hold on. I don't want to deviate. I don't want to deviate. I don't want to go all over the place. I don't want to deviate, but you all get the gist of what I'm speaking about, right? Low income environments. Environment is not the word I'm looking for. Society is not the word I'm looking for. Cities, low income places, low income cities, right? All that also affects a whole community. Okay? And that in itself is also part of ancestral trauma. Okay? That gets passed down collectively. So what I'm trying to express and teach us is that ancestral trauma does not just affect us individually, and it's not just inherited or passed down genetically through our bloodline, but it also affects a whole community. It can also affect a whole race, and it gets passed down collectively. Okay, this is very important. Okay, women are also affected by generational trauma, collectively speaking, right? If we talk about Western society, women, okay, women that for eons, were told that they were just meant to stay home, have babies, cook for husband, have sex, clean the house, and that's it. Because you were not important out there in the world. You were not important out there in society. You needed permission from a man. I hope I'm not going all over the place, but I need to establish this because this is also part of ancestral traumas. Trust and believe that this is also part of ancestral traumas. Women needed permission from a man to be able to open a bank account. Did you all know that? Many of you do know, but is there somebody in here that's never heard that before? Women needed a permission from a man to be able to open a bank account. Hello? What the fudge is that? Right? Women's voting rights. I'm going somewhere with this. Women's voting rights. How hard the women had to fight to have voting rights. Right? And if I haven't lost my history lessons, because I'm not all, it's been a long time, but it is my understanding what I can recollect, and anybody in this life, please feel free to correct me if I get this information wrong. But I believe that it wasn't until World War I, or maybe World War II, I'm not completely clear on this. My memory fails me right now. But it was either until World War I or World War II where women were needed in the workforce. They were needed because the men were out there in war, so they needed people to work. And that's when women came out to work. It's a whole different topic. We can go on for hours and hours and hours on that topic, right? So therefore, where I'm trying to go to with this is that generational trauma is not just inherited from my mom and my dad and my grandpapa and my grandmama. Generational traumas is also inherited collectively as well. Specific groups, genders, right? Communities are affected also by generational trauma, which then leads me to my other point as to how, because certain generational traumas are passed down and can also be inherited collectively through a whole community and through a whole race, it also affects the land in which we live in. Specific lands can be affected by generational trauma as well. Okay? How can we prove this to be true? Well, if you visit, hear me out, if you visit certain cities in the South, I'm a black man, so I'm going to talk about what I know, right? If you go to certain cities in the South, you will visit certain states that still carries that gray cloud, that very dark gray cloud of generational trauma because of all that went down in that land, right? Deep down in the South, Mississippi, Alabama, okay? Do you all hear me? Am I making any logical sense to any of you? So if the land is affected, you can feel it in your bones. You can feel it in the energy, right? Because of all those souls that died in those lands, that were butchered, that were hung, that were hanged, okay, that were abused, that were burned, that were murdered by the hundreds. By the hundreds. So people born in those places, especially for the purposes of the example that I'm using, for those that were born there that are black, it's different. It's different. They have a different experience than a black person that was probably born in, I don't know, in Oregon or Seattle, Washington. Right? Anyway, I just need you to understand how deep generational trauma can affect us. Not just individually, but also collectively. Let's go into how can we detect generational trauma. Aside from the obvious, right? Ways that you can go about detecting if you are a product of generational trauma and you may not even know. You may not even know you have, I'm gonna come at you right now. You have normalized your behavior to such a degree that you don't even know that is a product of your own generational trauma. I'm not going to call it a curse, right? A curse is only a curse through its repetitive behavior or nature that keeps you living beneath your divine source's expectation, desire, dream, goal, vision for you. Okay? So therefore, how can we detect if they are generational traumas that we are experiencing? Well, I would advise for us to keep copious notes on your behaviors, your repeated behaviors. What are your repeated behaviors? Have you self-analyzed yourself outside of criticism and judgment? Let me repeat that again. Have you analyzed yourself outside of criticism and judgment? It is important for you to keep copious notes on your behaviors, repeated behaviors. Do you always let people into your life that your gut already knows you shouldn't let in? Do you always tend to stay in relationships longer than you should? Do you always look at yourself as less than and not beautiful enough and not sexy enough and not worthy enough and not capable enough and not intelligent enough? Do you always tend to be attempting to fix other people, but then yet you can fix yourself? Do you always have a behavior of satisfying everyone's needs, and then yet yours are continuously dissatisfied? Do you always have a behavior of picking on potential relationships of people that you know have issues, that you know have problems, that you know have major screwed up situations, that you feel that you are the one that needs to come in and fix it? Do you hear me? Does anyone hear me tonight? Do you have a tendency of just being very jealous of everything and of everyone? No one around you may notice it because you keep it very secretly protected, but you know you're an envious person, and you know you're habitually jealous, and you know that you're always comparing yourself to someone else. Right? Do you always tend to find yourself in settings where no matter how good you do, it never really feels good enough to you? It just never feels good enough to you. Are you the kind of person that makes a 95 on a test and then yet looks like all sad and you want to cry and you can't even celebrate your 95 because you didn't make 100? These are important things to understand. So one way for us to be able to detect if there are specific generational traumas, again, I don't call them curses, I call them traumas. I call them traumas because in my personal opinion, in order for it to be a curse, it needs to be a repetitive behavior over and over and over and over and over and over again, as to how I explained at the beginning of this live, that keeps us living beneath what God, the divine source of your understanding, had intended for us. So for the perspectives of understanding generational traumas, we first looked at our for tonight's introduction, we first looked at our root chakra, because there are these three major chakras that are affected by generational trauma. The first one, which is our root chakra, which is also the chakra of groups, how we find ourselves in groups, family groups and other kinds of groups. It affects our second chakra because remember, it was stated tonight that whatever information is stored, our history, is stored in our first chakra. And that is present from the moment that we are a fetus. That information that is stored in our first chakra gets passed up to our second chakra, which is our sacral chakra, which is also referred to as our sexual chakra, not just based on sex, but based on our ability to bond and connect, right? And whatever information is stored in our second chakra gets passed up to our third, which is about our identity, how we identify, how we see ourselves, how we feel ourselves, and also our autonomy. We said this, right? We spoke about how ancestral trauma does not just affect us individually in terms of what has been passed down to us genetically, biologically, mom, dad, and so on, but it also affects us collectively. I personally, being a black man, a black Hispanic man, I use the example of my black people. What has affected a community of people, right? 400 plus years of being enslaved, traumatized, dehumanized, murdered, abused, and so on, and the list goes on and on and on. That gets passed down collectively, okay? How we get stuck in certain areas, low income areas, right? The prison systems, which is a business, right? So all these things affects a whole community. It's not just individual. It's also a community. We spoke about how can we identify, how can we take steps into identifying if I am still living, going about life under the manipulation and control of a generational trauma. And the first step is self-analyzing yourself. Outside, I'm very specific with this because I need this to be very important. Outside of self-judgment and criticisms. This is a self-analysis that allows us to walk into self-awareness outside of self-criticism and judgment. This is where I said, look at your behaviors. What are your behaviors? Are you an excessive jealous person? Are you habitually someone that's always criticizing other people? Are you someone that always feels less than? Are you someone that never feels like you can fit? Are you someone that always goes about life never being able to make a decision, never being able to feel comfortable, never being able to be in the spotlight of anything, never being able to take the initiative? Is that your behavior? Is that your pattern? Are you someone that always tends to fall into relationships that you feel you need to fix? That could be a behavior issue too. Or you're always someone that, is afraid of everything, afraid of everyone. Fear of this, fear of that, fear of everything and anything. That's also, it could be a generational trauma that you have inherited in some way. And needless to say, if you're black, you have an inherited trauma. Which is why ancestral veneration And ancestral healing is so important. This is why on a yearly basis, I do the ancestral healing, ancestral veneration and healing every single year. And I specifically use this time period, the Scorpio time period, November 2nd, which is All Souls Day, because it's a great time period to the sensitivities and the veil between heaven and earth, or more or less earth, more so earth and the other side, which is right next to us. This whole thing about heaven and earth, anyway, it's a different topic. But the veil between the seeing, the known and the unknown is very thin, it is said to be. And I choose to do the ancestral veneration and healing ceremony during that time period. It's going to be on November 2nd, on the actual day of All Souls Day, okay? And trust me, we all have something that we have to work through. We all have something that we have to work through. Another way to, I want to actually bring in another thing into our conversation tonight. Another way that you can take a look at your ancestral traumas and behaviors and patterns is do an analysis of your childhood. What was your mom like? What was your dad like? Were they even present? Were they physically there and emotionally absent? Or were they all absent altogether? How was your communication? How was the communication between mom and dad? Did you feel included or excluded? What kind of things did you witness? Did you witness abuse? Did you witness whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse? Were you yourself a victim of these? These are the things that you have to keep, copious notes on in order for you to really put a history together, right? A history together of what you've been through, what you experienced, what you saw, what happened to you. Because there's things that we need to heal, release, and elevate. This is why this year I changed the name. It was always Ancestral Healing Ritual, Ancestral Healing Ritual, Ancestral Healing Ritual. This year, Spirit said Ancestral Veneration and Healing Ceremony, because it just shouldn't be about the healing. Why? Because I have to understand my history in order for me to address and release my history, and then elevate it. I have to elevate. These same ancestral people, right, our families, we must learn how to elevate them. Okay? It's so important for us to understand this part, and I'm going to come again. As of today, I'm going to come on every week to talk about the Ancestral Veneration Healing Ceremony, right? But very, very short. It is important for us to elevate our ancestors. Reason being, there are many people who sadly had a very traumatic experience with a deceased loved one. Father, grandma, aunt, mom, dad, stepdad. It's a different story. Stepdad is not necessarily in the bloodline, but we'll talk about that also. We will also talk about that. And because the memory that you have of your mom, the memory that you have of your dad is very traumatic for you. And the taste that left behind in your mind and in your heart is so bitter and so traumatic that many people say, I want nothing to do. I want absolutely nothing to do with my mom. They can go to hell for all I care. Right? They can go this, they can rot in hell, they can do this, they can do that. Let me tell you, please allow me to share with you that no matter what you and I do, we cannot, I cannot even explain this in a way that I wanted to come across. We cannot divorce ourselves from what runs through our blood. We cannot divorce ourselves from what runs through our DNA. We can't. You can choose to ignore it. It's your prerogative, your choice. You can choose to not be directly involved and deal with it. That is your choice, your free will, or what have you. But no matter what you and I choose to do, no matter what you and I choose to do, the power of choice, we cannot divorce ourselves from the blood that runs through our veins. We can't. And even though the unaddressed issues, the unaddressed traumas can be in one area of your life, it may not always show up in the same exact way, in the same exact manner, but it will affect other areas. You have traumas in the love department, in the romantic department, in the way you fall into relationships. And it may not show up like that in your current life. You may have a history of that, but it may not show up like that in your current life. But it will show up in your finances. It will show up in how you love yourself. It will show up at work. It will show up in how you bond with people. It will show up somewhere else. Doesn't always show up in the same exact way, same exact manner. But what we choose to not address here will show up over there. So for the many of you that because of what you went through with mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, and whomever, because of what you went through was so traumatic and was so painful, and in your mind so unforgivable, that which we do not address, that which we fail to confront, has a stronghold on us, has some kind of control over our life. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. You might want to ignore your relationship with dad, the pain mom caused, but how are you in relationship with other people in your life? How are you in relationship with friends and your coworkers and the people that you choose to be in romantic relationships with? Are you that person that needs to be in control of everything because you feel that if you're not in control of it, you're losing parts of you and you cannot even fathom the idea of losing parts of you? That's why you're always in control. Do you not know how to surrender because it doesn't feel comfortable to you? Because you grew up under a setting where mom was always in control of everything, because that's the way she best knew how to do it. And now you, as a product of that, also adopts that same behavior. And even though you might be with a partner that loves you, but then yet the dynamic of how both of you connect and what both of you build is not strong enough because you unintentionally emasculate your partner. Because you're the one that needs to make the last decision. You're the one that needs to have the last voice. You're the ones that needs to be in control of everything because you don't know how to surrender. That's a generational trauma. It is a product of some form of generational trauma. And it is your job and your duty, and you owe it to yourself to get to the bottom of what's hiding beneath the surface. Because unless you address what's hidden beneath the surface, you won't ever thrive above. You won't ever thrive above. At least not to the standards, not to the vision, not to the desire of your divine source and your divine creator and how your divine source created you to be. So we must look. Sometimes, you know how they say we should never look backward. We should never look towards the back. We should never look behind us. You know, that is true in certain cases. But oftentimes, I beg to differ because I believe that in order for us to move forward, sometimes we do have to look backwards. In order for us to be able to successfully move forward, we're gonna have to see what back there still affects me today and doesn't allow me to embrace the best version of me, the best version of myself. What hidden situation or information, what history, what trauma, what behavior, what pattern is still haunting me energetically, spiritually, individually, and or collectively. Do you hear me? Did any of this make sense to you tonight? Next week, I'm going to come back and I'm going to speak more on the veneration part because I didn't really touch on the veneration aspect of it, right? And just to briefly give you a glimpse as to what that looks like. Everything about our history is not all ugly. It's not all awful. It's not the worst of the worst. It's not all detrimental. It's not all, no. Horrendous. We also have good things in our history. But it's our job to reach in. It's our job to lean forward. It's our job to bring it to the light. And many of us do have people that are deceased, family, loved ones that are deceased, that we truly loved and that we consciously know and are aware loved us. And if we have understanding as to how this relationship still exists, though they are not physically here, they're still right by our side. And we need of their protection, of their light, as much as they need of our ability to elevate their vibration, their spirit. Their spirit. So the veneration aspect of it takes various forms. It takes the form of giving light and energy to those that were good to us, that did protect us, that did love us, so that we can continue to give them light in their own spiritual journey on the other side. But it also takes the form of elevating those. Veneration is also about elevating those that are in need of more light because maybe the way they departed the earth was not the best, was not the most peaceful, okay? Was not, it could have been traumatic. Car accidents, motorcycle accidents, suicides, gunshot wounds, stabbed to death, run over by a bus, fell in front of the railroad tracks and got run over a train. Traumatic events of deceased loved ones that departed, that we loved them and they loved us, but they had traumatic departures. And their spirits needs to be elevated. Okay? It needs to be elevated so that they can detach themselves from the earthly minds and they're able to reach a higher level of elevation. Oh, I'm going to get into that later. I'm going to get into that hopefully on Saturday. If you have not yet signed up for the Ancestral Veneration and Healing Ceremony, it will take place on November 2nd, on All Souls Day, okay? And it'll be online, so there's no excuse for you not to be able to participate regardless of where in the world you're at, okay? And it will be at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if by any reasons, due to work, due to other engagements, you're not able to be present live at the moment of the Ancestral Veneration Healing Ceremony, a replay will be available. And even though I would love for you to be present live, if you cannot be present live, it does not take away from what's going to take place, at the day of. It does not take away from it, because your ancestors' names, the one you include in this year's Ancestral Veneration Healing Ceremony, will still be included, will still be prayed to, will still be elevated, okay, will still be given light to. So it does not take away, This is not just something that it is only effective because you get to see it. No, you get to see it because I want you to see it so that you can witness what goes down, but it does not take away in any way, shape, or form of what's supposed to go down in that particular moment, okay? So again, if you are interested, which I hope you are, in the Ancestral Veneration and Healing Ceremony, click the link in my bio. There is a payment plan available, so there's no excuse. By all means, if you are in need of other kinds of arrangements in order to be able to participate in the Ancestral Veneration Healing Ceremony, feel free to reach out, okay? Feel free to reach out. Many of you are also that kind that don't know how to ask, don't know how to reach out, are afraid to, feel like you don't need to, or you're too prideful. That's also part of some kind of generational ancestral trauma, believe it or not. More on that to come in the very near future in other conversations. So there's no excuse for you not to participate. It is important for us to take part of this yearly event, because you'd be surprised, my soul family, how it supports us in our journey, even in ways that we can't always see immediately, but it does support us. It supports us throughout the year, in times of need, in times of confusion, in times of chaos, in times of health crisis, in times of, emotional issues, in times of so many different ups and downs. It is very supporting to give light and elevation to our ancestors, our deceased loved ones. It does help us out throughout the following year, throughout the whole year, right? In being able to continue journeying through this life. So again, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. And for those of you that always sees, and I'm not trying to play a mind game with you on this one, because I don't subscribe. Excuse my French, sorry but not sorry. You already know how I am if you know me. I don't subscribe to mind fucks. Okay. So I'm not doing this or saying this or expressing this to guilt you in any way, shape, or form. But let me tell you something. Those of you that at times we look at certain things and the first thing out of our mouth is, oh no, is this too expensive? That's too pricey. That's too this. That's too that. I can't do that. That can also be a part of an extension of a generational trauma, right? Because perhaps you come from somewhere or from someone, or you were raised by people that would never spend an extra dime on anything. On anything. On anything. Maybe you come from people that always had the need to save every single dime. I wonder if they are the same people that died with $60 and $100 and $150 and $200,000 in the bank, like somebody in my family that I know, that never did anything with it because they were all about saving. I need to save for a rainy day. And then yet, when life surprised them and took them out, nothing was ever done with those 150, 250, 300,000 grand that they had saved. And thirdly, for some of us, it's kind of hard to spend money on things. And money is an energy. Money is a currency. Money is an energy. And for us to find it so hard to make an investment in ourselves, financially speaking, on things that are beneficial for us spiritually, energetically, emotionally, mentally, we have to also then, on the other side of that scale, we must also include the fact that I may have a hard time spending this money over here. But how much is it costing me throughout the whole year? How much is it costing me to not be happy, to not feel fulfilled, to not feel self-actualized, to not feel autonomous, to not feel in control of my life, to not have the quality of love that I know I deserve and I desire, to not be able to manifest the financial growth, to not be able to be in a better home, to not be able to live in a better city, to not be able to be in a relationship that actually appreciates me, loves me, respects me, to not be in a place where I am taken into account, that I am admired, that I am respected by family, by friends, by other people, to be in a work setting that, abuses me and works me to death but never gives me a raise. How much? You're trying to save $200 over here. But energetically and spiritually, how much is it costing you throughout the whole year? Food for thought. Anyway, I'm out of here. I shall be back hopefully this weekend to continue elaborating and sharing information and knowledge on ancestral healing, ancestral veneration. Okay? I love you all. I love you all. I love you all. Many blessings to you. Abundant blessings to each and every one of you. Please do me a favor and share this video, share this live, tag somebody you know needs to listen to this, okay? And if you haven't yet, sign up for the Ancestral Veneration Healing Ceremony. The link is in my bio. There's no excuse. Or you can visit my website, Spiritual Dr. Afi, okay? Spiritual spelled out, doctor spelled out, Afi, AFI.com. Go to the events section, and there you will see it there too. There's no reason for you not to have all the information you need to have in order to sign up. Okay? But I'll be back to talk more about the Ancestral Veneration Healing Ceremony. I hope to see you there. It's going to be lit. I know this because Spirit already told me. Much love to each and every one of you. Have a great rest of your night.